So previously I said that I was beginning a new series on this channel analyzing various indie run-and-gun games and how well they carry the Contra legacy back in January of last year, and never made another episode. This will be the first of a series where I analyze a game that is clearly inspired by Contra and how well it continues the legacy that franchise left in the video game industry. Whoops, sorry about that. Let's try to get this rolling again. After all, there's already a good number of run-and-gun titles made by small teams that have made their way to platforms over the past few years, and I intend to go into detail about them in future videos. For now, let's focus on a recent release. A new indie game launched July of this year known as Blazing Chrome. Right from the get-go, I knew I had to give this game a shot. Explosive run-and-gun action and 16-bit sprites. I was already sold. I will be focusing on the core gameplay and design of this title, while also touching more on its presentation to see how it carries the Contra legacy, a series that really defined the run-and-gun genre, which, until recently, has been dormant for nearly a decade. But what does it take to carry the legacy of a Contra game in the truest sense? I think it can be brought down to a science. The best and truest Contra games have at least the majority of these following traits: tight controls, quick-paced moments that are often dependent on reflexes, some pattern memorization, a tight learning curve that'll feel somewhat unfair at times, a kick-ass soundtrack, and large, threatening bosses heavily inspired by the sci-fi genre. Do you need every single one of these traits to carry the Contra legacy? No, but you do need most of them, in my opinion. This is an easy way to see if entries by independent developers have what it takes to make that legacy shine when they tackle the run-and-gun genre. Oh, and something to think about, especially for later topics: no, the gameplay does not strictly have to be 2D in order to be a great entry to Contra or its successors. With that said, let's start getting into Blazing Chrome. The developers of this game are known as Joy Masher, an indie group comprised of just 3 people. Teased more than 2 years prior, it finally hit the PS4, Xbox One, PC, and Nintendo Switch. I played through it a few times over, and I'm actually really mixed on the game. There's plenty going on that they nailed really well, but a lot of what this game offers didn't rub me the right way. So we're going to try to dissect how it carries the Contra legacy, or at least attempts to. Not to say that Blazing Chrome is only inspired by Contra. I can see they took strong inspiration from other games such as Space Harrier and Metal Slug. Still, I'd like to focus on the Contra legacy for this video, since that is the most important aspect to me and what I look for in a run-and-gun title. Also, it's clearly taking more from Contra Hardcore on Sega Genesis than anything else. Before really diving into that, I'll speak of Blazing Chrome in a more general standpoint. It's a run-and-gun game, of course, that has you jump across platforms while mowing down enemy hordes along the way. But be careful, even the slightest touch from an enemy will kill you if you're not protected. With a limited number of lives and the opportunity to earn more along the way, you have to learn enemy patterns or react quickly in order to stand a chance against these nasty foes. With a campaign of 5 stages, you can choose up to 4 different characters, 2 which need to be unlocked through completing said campaign at least once, and even buddy up with someone to clear the game in a cooperative fashion. Your machine gun is always at the ready, and there are 3, really just 3? Different weapons to find throughout the stages as well, along with some enhancement pickups that we'll discuss later. You also have a rolling mechanic to help you avoid enemy attacks, rewarding quick reaction. But be careful, dissimilar to Contra Hardcore's slide attack, there's no active hitbox nor invincibility frames when using it. If you roll right into an enemy, you're dead. That's the gist of this explosive 16-bit game honoring the generation the run-and-gun genre strived in. Now to see if it rings true to the Contra legacy, as well as go over my thoughts on the entire game as an experience. Oh, and spoilers from here on out. So, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the controls. You got all the basics down, of course. Moving and shooting feels fine. They got the aim feature we've been seeing in these games since Contra 3, all well and good. But, of course, no way to lock your aim while being able to move freely. I swear it's like nobody played Contra Shattered Soldier. I mean, I'm probably not wrong, but they're missing out. Still, I'm starting to think it's not something they're leaving out for the sake of the game's design or challenge. More likely, they're just not aware of the clever mechanic that helps the player take even better control of their character. Even Metal Slug used this mechanic, a couple times. I found aiming down diagonally to be a bit faulty. I have to hold my direction a lot closer to down on the D-pad than I'm used to in order to get that spot where my character will actually aim below themselves diagonally. In order to get it to happen more quickly, I lock my position with the R button. It's a bit frustrating when I'm in the thick of enemy fire. I never had this issue with any of the Contra games. The rolling mechanic, likely inspired by the slide attack from Contra Hardcore, is something I'm having a hard time making use out of, besides particular moments. I think it has to do with the fact that it doesn't have any invincibility frames, which is fine, I'm not asking for a crutch. I just can't ever find a time where I really need to use it. It's gotten to the point where I'm experimenting with it more than I have to out of sheer curiosity. I'll tell you one thing though, this mechanic makes the Contra blood in me boil, since a decent amount of times, the dodge roll comes out by accident because my brain assumed it would let me jump below to a different platform. Something that's been in the Contra games for decades, but Blazing Chrome left out completely. The game's pace doesn't feel quite right. I wouldn't call it slow, but it feels like there isn't enough going on most of the time, outside of some boss fights. I feel like instead of projectiles or quick enemies, the game thinks big bugs and such are a better design when it comes to enemy waves. I'm not a fan of that, to be honest. Something that can help the pace of it is the support pickups, which there are 3. One speeds you up and gives you the ability to double jump, one is for defense so you can take a couple extra hits without dying, and the last is for an attack bot to shoot enemies alongside you and can even fire bullets in angles your character cannot. I actually think these pickups are a great idea. Instead of just giving you all this shit at once like certain other games, you need to make the decision right then and there what will benefit you most for the time being. And if you're not careful, you'll lose these advantages in an instant. Speaking of pickups, I'm not thrilled about the weapon choices. There's only 4 different guns in the entire game. The one I found interesting was the charge laser. The way its hit scan blast works makes for some excellent crowd clearing and strategy. Otherwise, the whip doesn't feel very useful for most situations, the grenade launcher is insanely overpowered, and the default machine gun is, well, just that. I was hoping the weapon pickup system would be closer to Contra Hardcore as a way to make each character feel unique. Well, the 2 default characters are completely alike, as are the 2 unlockable characters between each other. I'll give these 2 credit for making the game feel much different when playing as them, but I don't find their mechanics very interesting since it seems their means of attack are staunchly unbalanced for this kind of game. The best aspect of Blazing Chrome has to be the visuals. It captures the 16-bit run-and-gun action generation excellently. The developers even withheld using high amount of different colors on screen in order to stay true to that style. And the moments where they do take liberties are not too obvious and provide some fantastic visual flair. The boss designs are especially great. This is more of what I want from games trying to carry the Contra legacy. Big, beefy bots that take up most of the screen. I'd like some more gross alien-like designs, but the ones we get are still pretty satisfying. The sound design is fine. I can't help but get a bit nostalgic when I hear that scratchy Blazing Chrome on the title screen. Although, I found the soundtrack to be surprisingly underwhelming. It sure sounds all synthy and old school and whatever other term you want to throw in there. That can't be denied, but it just isn't that exciting. Compare that to the absolute chaos oozing out of the songs from Contra Hardcore, the game Blazing Chrome was clearly most inspired from. I don't know, I'd rather not speak ill of the composer, but it felt like they were more preoccupied with sounding like these songs are from a previous generation and less about the soundtrack having its own personality or style. The only track I'd consider memorable might be the credits theme, for obvious reasons. So how hard was this game for someone as seasoned in Contra sauce as me? I'll be honest, I had a harder time getting used to the controls and mechanics than the enemy lineup. Perhaps it's because I've gone around this block so many times, but a lot of the boss and sub-boss reads are so blatant I knew how to avoid a good chunk of their attacks without ever seeing them beforehand. Still, it's not like the game is throwing warning signs on the screen, so it could be worse. Just like in Cuphead, I can give them credit for having some faith in my ability as a run and gun player. I'm trying not to judge the game from some ivory tower either. While I am pretty proud of my ability to adapt and conquer many run and gun games, I'm not a wizard. I die in Contra plenty of times. Those days of dedicating endless hours on Shattered Soldier to master and complete the campaign without dying a single time just for that stupid Sparkster ending are well behind me. With that said, I would say Blazing Chrome is slightly harder than Cuphead, but I think that primarily has to do with the fact that you have a limited number of lives for the scenarios. In other words, the game itself is more punishing by design. Stack that with the hardest difficulty only giving you a limited amount of continues. I dig the campaign structure. It's similar to Contra Shattered Soldier and Neo Contra, just about as long of a campaign as well. I didn't expect the game to be gigantic, but I guess I'll say I was a little surprised to see it was only 5 real stages. It still gives you plenty to learn and master. If anything, I wish the boss lineup was a little bigger since they're easily the highlight of this game. I will give credit where it's due though. The 5th mission is all around great. I think the folks at Joymasher wanted to make sure this was the most challenging and diverse stage of the entire game, so it has more of that level design I look for in Contra's successors. Makes me wish the entire game was like this. Minus the snowmobile part, that just felt kind of obnoxious. There's also a bonus difficulty to unlock known as Hardcore mode. As far as I can tell, the enemies take more hits and are slightly faster, I think? I can't really tell. Their behaviors and patterns don't seem to be any different. I'm not particularly a fan of this mode. It feels like normal mode was more balanced and tested for players in general. The hardcore difficulty just feels too tedious to me. It's different from, say, Contra 3's hard mode. Not only did enemies require more hits, but nearly the entire enemy lineup had their properties, movement speeds, and mannerisms completely altered, from the smallest one-hit grunts to the most gargantuan alien threats. It even has a secret final boss. I would say that difficulty setting in Contra 3 leans a bit too far to be considerably fair, but now's not the time to get into that. What I'm trying to say is the developers took a not so popular approach to try making the game feel like a very unique experience compared to the normal difficulty setting that players would be more likely to complete. A much more interesting bonus feature is Mirrored Mode, in which you go through the entire game with the layout horizontally flipped. All I can say in regards to this mode is that it's really funny how insanely disorienting it can be. So, what does Blazing Chrome have for a guy like me looking for serious Contra goodness? Well, the visuals are definitely there, goes for that clunker junk mech style for a lot of its atmosphere, and we can't leave out the robo-hemoths that await you at the end of most stages. Learning to react to their patterns can be fun. The most lackluster parts of my experience would be the music, level design, small weapon variety, and common enemies. All the robotic fodder and bugs just start to meld together and don't leave a lasting impression on me, not like a lot of the enemies in classic Contra games. I'm seeing certain phrases get thrown around regarding Blazing Chrome like it's the perfect successor to Contra we've all been waiting for. And to that I say, not quite. The fine people at Joymasher are headed in the right direction, and I commend them for their efforts making this game. Blazing Chrome was able to expertly capture that look and style of the generation they were dedicating this game to. I think if they were to make a sequel, it would come out even better than this, now that they really dipped their toes into the style and everyone experiencing this game so far have been praising them for it. They got certain aspects of the run and gun genre down, I just want them to improve where they are currently lacking to me. I don't regret this experience, and I ultimately don't think any die-hard Contra fan should either. If anything, it helps remind me what made Contra such a fantastic series for me. I could even say, in a way that Cuphead did not. I'm speaking about the visuals, of course. But as someone who's looking for the intense and fascinating level designs that can stand with Contra's best titles layered with a deeply challenging enemy lineup while being surrounded by a masterful soundtrack, I'm afraid the search continues. Thanks for watching.